Class is now in session. I'm Professor Hockey, and today we'll be discussing the game between the Sharks and the Lightning, in which the Sharks got shut out 3-0. So, a better performance, I guess, than their first game against the Lightning this season, which was a 7-1 loss. But it is, of course, still a loss. And coming into this game, I'm sure with the injuries to Couture, with the injuries to Hurdle, it wasn't necessarily expected that the Sharks would necessarily be able to win this game, but they put up a bit of a fight. In the first period would actually end 0-0. The Sharks would only get 2 shots, and the Lightning would just fire shot after shot after shot, but it would be Aaron Dell who would manage to keep the Lightning off the board. They easily could have been down 2-0, 3-0, if not more than that, if not for Aaron Dell's heroics. Come second period, the Sharks actually began to fight back. They outshot the Lightning pretty significantly in that period. They just couldn't seem to beat McElhinney. There weren't so many fantastic chances, but there were a few really great shifts from the Sharks. Dell would end up giving up 1 goal. That would be to Steven Stamkos to make it 1-0 Lightning, and that's where we would find ourselves after 40 minutes come third period. While not as good as the second, the Sharks were still in it, certainly in the third period, but it would be Nikita Kucherov late, just in the last couple of minutes, who would get that insurance and dagger goal to make it 2-0 before Palat would get the empty netter to make it 3-0. So all in all, as I said, not necessarily a game that the Sharks were expecting to win, coming up against this really hot Lightning team. I mean, the Lightning, yes, obviously they have been struggling, at least by Lightning standards, only being second in the Atlantic, but let's not forget that they are just a year removed from being this fantastic over 60 wins team. Very little has changed since then. They're one of the deepest teams offensively in the NHL, and the Sharks, with these 2 injuries, are one of now the least deep teams in the NHL. So the fact that the Sharks even kept it remotely close, I thought was impressive. Now, normally you could commend the effort for teams that are in a way not so great in the standings because they're normally looking to rebuild in a certain way. The Sharks are not really in that situation, but still I guess you can commend the hard work that they did put in, especially in the second period and I guess in the third period as well, to keep this game rather close. The first thing to talk about would be Aaron Dell. As I said, he kept the Sharks live completely in that first period. He was by far the best Sharks player on the ice. Dell has just been extremely impressive here since, I guess, the new year, you could honestly say. And it obviously begins to beg the question whether or not Dell will have to be re-signed at the end of this season. It's quite the dangerous game, honestly. The Sharks had some great backup performances from Dell at the end of his previous contract, and that earned him the 2-year, $1.9 million. But the Sharks came to regret that contract for about a year and a half because last season his backup duties were quite disappointing, and the start of this year he really wasn't any better, and it's only been, as I said, the start of the new year where he has begun to improve. So if you give him an actual contract, I mean, anything more than 1 year seems like it would be a mistake, because who knows what Dell's real level is. Is this the real level we should expect from Dell? These very good performances, some strong save percentage, because, you know, if the Sharks were in a better situation, it would have been difficult to lose with a goaltender performance like this. But if they end up giving him, let's say, another decent deal, $2 million or something, he could very easily just come back down to earth and the Sharks could be in a tough position. So it's going to be a very odd call that they're going to have to try and make in this offseason, especially when you're trying to work around the contract that Martin Jones, of course, has. This also, with this performance tonight, again begins to beg the question why Jones actually got the start in Vancouver the previous game. It's still sort of mind-boggling to me why Booner would decide to go with Jones there instead of just keep with Dell, who, again, is impressing. Next, I'll talk about Meier and Kane. I obviously pointed to these 2 players who had to step up in the absence of Hurdle and Couture, and I guess on paper they didn't do a very good job considering the Sharks scored a grand total of 0 goals in this game. However, I thought Meier was quite good, one of the best forwards for the Sharks on the night. Kane, not as great as Meier, but still decent. Meier certainly could have gotten a goal or 2 in this game. He had some great chances. While I've been praising a lot of Aaron Dell's performance, a lot of credit should go to Curtis McElhinney on the side of the Tampa Bay Lightning. Even though the Sharks only got 0 goals in this game, and that could be a big part because their offense isn't so great with those couple of injuries, maybe with a slightly more average goaltending performance from the opposing team's goaltender, the Sharks could have gotten a couple and maybe would have seen some overtime, but still a good performance from Meier, and hopefully he can keep that up. This is really a time for him to shine after he had started the season not so great. Next, I'll talk about Šimek. He actually had a pretty solid game. I probably could have also included his defense partner Mario Ferraro, but Šimek, a couple of decent decent defensive plays, but I thought his offensive plays also had some moments to shine. As I said, it was a pretty hard-working game for a lot of Sharks players, and so Šimek really stood out to me as one who was maybe going the extra mile. And finally, I'll talk about the young guys here. As with a lot of these injuries, some of these younger players have come in to step up. Now, the first one, and more tragically, is Joel Shellman. He started this game actually quite well, but he only got to play about 4 minutes before he got injured. Just a completely dirty cross-check from Kevin Shattenkirk. Didn't end up getting penalized for that somehow. But it looked like he looks like he might be injured, and so now the top two centermen for the Sharks are injured, as well as their fourth-line center. I guess now you probably move Gambrell to the center position to run with Goodrow, Thornton, Suomela, and Gambrell, but obviously not an optimal situation. Suomela actually, I thought, had a pretty solid game here tonight. He even got some penalty kill time, which I'm sure if DeBoer, after his victory with the Golden Knights earlier today, was decided to tune into the Sharks game, he'd probably had a heart attack seeing Suomela killing penalties, but he did a decent job at that. In fact, the Sharks penalty kill was, I believe, perfect here tonight, and the Sharks actually took a pretty decent amount of penalties, and they're against the Lightning, who have, I think, the third best power play in the league. So the Sharks penalty kill, basically the one positive from this season that has remained a positive for the entire year, continues to do so. And Gambrell, I didn't particularly notice Gambrell all too often. I thought he was okay. I don't think he was a huge deficit to the team, but compared to the previous game where he had a really strong performance, I was hoping to see a bit more. I mean, by previous game, I mean the game against the Ducks, not necessarily the game against the Canucks. But that will do it for this review. The Sharks will be back in action on Tuesday. They'll face off against the Calgary Flames, another divisional game. So if you are still holding out hopes for the Sharks making the playoffs, even with these couple of losses, that's going to be a very important game, as of course the Flames are in the thick of things in the Pacific Division, and the Sharks are going to try and break into that if they can possibly do so. But these, as I said, these past couple of losses to the Lightning and the Canucks certainly put a damper on that. Class dismissed.